What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Loft Sports Podcast. Brian and Tom, as always. Tom, what's going on, my man?
Nothing, man. We're close. We're really close now, a week from Thursday. I'm loving it. It's starting to get crazy. Like, I'm starting to get to the point where I'm borderline sick of talking about the draft, especially when I'm talking with lots of Cowboy fans who I love talking with. But it's just the scenarios are crazy and they're all over the place. And you're in your own head with your own thoughts. And it's like, there are all of us that would love to be NFL GMs, right? We all think we could do it. I can't imagine these 2 weeks before the draft if you're in a spot like just outside of the top 10 or maybe some of those teams in the early 20s. There are guys you want to get and guys that you're targeting. You don't know if they're going to get there. Do you trade up? Do you trade back? There's probably 1,000 thoughts that goes into the decision making in the next couple weeks. So I'm looking excited. I'm getting excited for it. But yeah, it's getting sounds like it's going to be crazy this year. No.
Yeah, my understanding is actually leading up to the draft. I mean, some of these GMs just do like what we do as fans. They do like a lot of mock drafts where they try to come up with these different scenarios of stuff that could happen, what might not happen, who could get traded, stuff like that, who's coming up, who's looking to trade back. So, yeah, I'm sure they're running through. I mean, if I was like a general manager, I'd probably run through every single type of situation like that could potentially happen, And so, of course, there's gonna be some situations that you can't even predict that are gonna happen. I don't know. It's just an absolutely crazy job to have leading up to the right next Thursday at this point. So
and then even then you're running these scenarios and you need to try to rank the scenarios by likelihood that they happen. I've been, just to let you in where my mind is, and we'll talk about this more when we do our mock draft a week from today, or our next one. I don't really think there are scenarios in which Caleb Downs gets to Dallas, but every time I look through things, I just think it's difficult for a player like that to get to Dallas. So I've done, in the last 2 weeks, God knows how many mock drafts I've done, just doing different scenarios. Then you have to try to rank them. Well, who's this team going to take? Who's that team going to take? Are any of these teams going to trade up? Like, there are teams behind potentially Dallas who might trade up to jump in front of them to get players that we're not even talking about yet. So yeah, somebody came out last week saying expect a lot of trades in the first 2 days. Mm-hmm. So that makes it interesting too. So yeah, it feels like a strange draft, and hopefully that makes for an entertaining, couple days next week.
All right, so let's get into it. So tonight, folks, right, this is episode 8 of our NFL Draft Series. So tonight we're focusing on the top cornerbacks in the upcoming drafts. All right, as we've been doing for every episode, we'll go through strengths, weaknesses, maybe some player comps, and which players might fit on specific teams regarding their team needs. So, Tom, cornerbacks, overall sentiment that you've seen from at least from the top 4 guys that we're going to be discussing tonight. Anything you've noticed overall in this class while doing your evaluations?
Yeah, and I think we'll touch on like 6 guys just when we get to the best of the rest. I'll touch on 2 more that I think these guys are surefire at least day 2 picks. I think there's just a lot of uncertainty in this class for a number of reasons. I mean, I think everybody at this point feels best about Mansoor, Delane, whether you think he's the best corner or not. And we'll get into each reason with these guys. But I think with Mansoor, Delane, you feel most comfortable with him. I think with Jermod McCoy, there's a lot to like and a lot of question marks about where his health is. I think with Avieon Terrell, you have a really steady cornerback who can probably play inside or outside, but just injured his hamstring at his pro day and ran 2 absolutely horrific times, probably because of the injury, but now there are question marks about him. And then the 4th guy is Colton Hood, who looks really good in one aspect of coverage, and then there are question marks about the other one. Just feel there's a lot of uncertainty where you could get any of these 6 guys that we're going to mention tonight, and any of them could turn into really solid cornerbacks for you. You could take any of these guys, maybe outside of Delane, who I feel most comfortable with, and there could be a world where these guys maybe it blows up a little bit in your face. So there's definitely talent. It's a fairly deep corner class, but I think there's uncertainty with all but one guy if we're talking like day 1 and 2 cornerbacks.
All right, let's start with Mansoor Delane, right? So he's 6 feet tall, 187 pounds, out of LSU, where he just finished his senior year. So here's a guy who originally committed to Virginia Tech, where he played for 3 seasons. In 2022, he recorded 38 tackles. For his career at Virginia Tech, he recorded 146 tackles, 16 pass deflections, 4 forced fumbles, and 6 interceptions. So has a good career at Virginia Tech, transfers to LSU in 2025, records 45 tackles, 11 pass deflections, 2 interceptions. Now, he did not work out at the combine, only went for measurements. And from what I read, his 30-inch arms, again, we're talking arm length here. He's a slightly smaller frame than some prototypical boundary corners, but he did run a 4.35 40. So he's projected as a mid-first round pick. Potentially he could be a top 10 pick in this draft. So talking about Mansoor Delane, his strengths, his weaknesses, if you have a player comp, and what is his outlook?
Yeah, so Mansoor Delane, you mentioned it in your write-up, but he spent 3 years at Tech, and then in his last year, wanted to challenge himself, wanted to go to probably a team more suited to potentially being a playoff team, but also wanted to play in a tougher conference. So he transfers to LSU, and he was outstanding at LSU. He is incredibly smooth in coverage. He's just so fluid, smooth in his back pedal, getting in and out of breaks when he needs to flip his hips to change directions. He does that with ease. He just always looks in control. Mirroring receivers looks really, really easy for him. He's just really tough to beat once the ball is snapped, and that's something that you definitely want your quarterbacks to be good in, especially if you're going to look to maybe potentially play him closer to the line of scrimmage. But he looks comfortable in both areas, right? There are going to be some guys that I talk about that I'm comfortable looking at the line of scrimmage, but then playing 5 or 10 yards off, they're just not the same player. Delane feels comfortable in either aspect of that game. He can play off, he can play press, he can play up near the line of scrimmage. There's no concerns there. He has great eye discipline, doesn't get fooled much, does a great job watching the quarterback while also having a feel. It's not one of those guys who eyes linger in the backfield. He does a great job reading what's happening around him. Once the ball's in the air, he can make plays on it. He's going to break on the ball at a high level, whether it's trying to break up passes or make tackles. He's going to get to the ball when he's asked to break on it. There were multiple times this year on 3rd or 4th down, teams tried to test him, and it just felt foolish that they even tried. Had 11 pass breakups at LSU alone. So it shows you his ability to stay tight in coverage and then go and make plays on the football. Has a really good feel for how to use his hands within coverage. Always has a receiver in touching distance, helps him with spacing and distance of the receiver, can be physical off the snap if needed, doesn't do it consistently, but can be, depending on the wide receiver. I don't think he'll get bullied much. I know that's a concern for some people. Can he be physical enough with the really physical wide receivers in the NFL? I think he can, but I would like to see him show that a bit more. He can be a little grabby at times. Didn't get flagged a lot in college, but it's something that NFL refs will look for and flag you for, so you just got to be careful with that. Comfortable in man or zone coverage. Talked about why he's comfortable in zone, but has a really good understanding in man. I think he looks more comfortable in man versus zone, but he can do either. And he's a physical football player. He's going to pursue the ball well. He wants to be involved with tackles, which we're going to talk about with certain cornerbacks here. Some corners don't always want to be involved in tackles, so when you have a guy who's a willing tackler, I'm going to make mention of it. Can tackle, is an okay tackler. I'd like to see him clean up his tackling technique. Will tackle at times with his shoulder or his head, dipping his head. Want to become more consistent wrapping guys up. He's willing to get involved in the run game, but he's got to find a way to either get off of blocks or become more comfortable avoiding them. Wasn't a big takeaway guy. He had 8 interceptions in 4 years, most of them coming his freshman year at Virginia Tech. He's more of like a safe corner versus a big play corner, and I would rather that type of corner personally. I don't need the guys who are make or break for interceptions and get beat trying to jump stuff. He's very comfortable just being a blanket guy, making it very, very difficult for wide receivers to make catches on him. He's a projected top 10 pick. I think his ceiling is going in the top 5. I'd be shocked if this guy makes it past the top 10. I know some mock drafts have him there. I think he's one of the best defensive players in this draft. And it wouldn't shock me if he goes higher than, like, I could see him going to the Giants. I know you'll talk about team needs in a second. I could see the Giants, all this talk about Sonny Styles or Jermod Love. I'd see draft night coming along and the Giants going, we need cornerback help. This guy's the best corner in the draft. He's there for us. Let's take him. My NFL comps are Quinyon Mitchell, Kool-Aid McKinstry, just guys who are really smooth in coverage, who can make plays on the football. He can be either one of those guys at his peak in the NFL.
Yeah, actually, the team fits for me. I did have the Giants as maybe the earliest he could go at number 5. The Giants did have him in for a top 30 visit. All right, the current cornerback depth chart, nothing special here. So they did sign Greg Newsome in free agency from Jacksonville. They also still have Deonte Banks, who's a former first-round pick there. He's kind of had like an up and down career so far. And then Paulson Adebo, he's like their third corner there. So there's definitely room on that depth chart to add a player of the caliber of Mansoor Delane. I think he'd be a guy who would start day one. And I think he could really, I think out of all the rookie corners, I agree with what you were saying. He's a guy who I think could really hold his own on one side of the field as a boundary corner. The Giants, speaking of the Giants, right? So the Giants were -2 in turnover differential last year. They only recorded 9 interceptions all of last season. So Mansoor Delane, I think, would be a great addition to their corner room. The Giants, they finished in the bottom 5 for for yards allowed per game last season. So yeah, defensively and specifically the secondary is where they need to improve. Another team. So this surprised me actually when I was looking at the film, or excuse me, looking at free agency here and looking at rosters. So the New Orleans Saints at number 8. So they also had him in for a top 30 visit. Looking at their cornerback depth chart, there's really nothing there. You just mentioned Kool-Aid McKinstry as a comparison. Kool-Aid McKinstry is probably the Saints' top corner right now. This is a team that lost Alontae Taylor in free agency to the Titans. He got a nice little payday out in Tennessee. The Saints did finish 4th in passing yards per game allowed last year. So they did have a good secondary, but again, you lose a guy like Alontae Taylor, you don't really add anything in free agency. Mansoor Delane could be that pick for them at number 8. And as I continue to go through here, there's a shot that Mansoor Delane could be drafted anywhere from 8 to 12 is what I have here. Next team I'm going to look at, Kansas City at number 9, right? They traded away Trent McDuffie to the Rams. They also lost Jalen Watson in free agency to the Rams. Their current cornerback depth chart, you've got guys like Christian Fulton, Kader Kohu, Noel Williams. I mean, there's not really much there. They were a top 10 defense last year in yards allowed per game last year, the Chiefs, but right, they lost a lot of guys. I just mentioned Trent McDuffie, Jalen Watson. They also lost Brian Cook, the safety, who was coming off a big year for them. And then as we continue to make our way through, right, the Bengals. They have guys like DJ Turner, Dax Hill. They lost Cam Taylor-Britt in free agency. There's no in-house replacement right now for him. They also, remember, this is a bad defense. They ranked 31st in the league in points allowed per game last year. Their corners only combined for 4 interceptions last year. Miami, number 11, absolutely no corners on their roster. Take a look at the Miami corner room. There's nobody there of note. And then I have your boys at number 12, right? They allowed the most points and most passing yards allowed per game last season. Only 6 interceptions on the year. Of course, you got Deron Bland there, Kobe Durant, who they just signed from the Rams, but there's room for improvement there with your boys. So I'm looking at him from either at 5 to the Giants or somewhere between 8 and 12. He will get drafted, Mansoor Delane, for one of those teams.
And I wouldn't even write out Washington as a potential destination either. I think any team from 5 to 12 could take this guy. He will not get past Dallas at 12. I also don't think he's going to get to Dallas at 12. Corner's a high value position, and he's a really good corner. Yeah, any of these teams make a ton of sense when we're talking fits. And he's a guy who's going to come in and be a starter from day one and even potentially like your team's top corner depending on where he goes and where he fits.
All right, let's go to the next corner on our list here. So we have Jermod McCoy, 6'1", 188 pounds from Tennessee, coming off of his junior season. He originally committed to Oregon State, where he played his freshman season. He had 31 tackles, 7 pass deflections, and 2 interceptions that year. Then he transferred to Tennessee in 2024. He recorded 44 tackles, 7 pass deflections, 4 interceptions. He had an elite coverage grade of an 89.6 PFF grade, which ranked in the top 10 nationally. Now, he missed the entire 2025 season with a torn ACL that he suffered early in 2025. But at a recent pro day, he ran a 4.3840, which is phenomenal coming off a torn ACL. Projections are looking like Jermod McCoy is going to be a mid-first to potentially late first-round pick. So looking at McCoy, what are his strengths? What are his weaknesses? If you have a comparison for him, and what's your outlook for McCoy?
Yeah, I mean, you summed it up, but he's a complicated prospect. He was unbelievable his sophomore year. If he was allowed to come out of the draft last year, he probably would be a first-round talent and potentially one of the first corners taken off the board. That's how good his film was as a sophomore. He got hurt in January 25, did not play a snap last year, finally ran at his pro day. He's not played on a football field since the end of 2024. So there are concerns. So everything I'm going to talk about is from his sophomore year film. Really smooth in coverage, moves well, can flip hips, change directions with ease, helps him mirror receivers at a really high level, fluid with the way he moves and mirrors guys, but this was pre-injury. Breaks on the ball at a high level with good speed, really active hands, both in pass breakups and INTs. He looks to make plays on the football, usually with good results, 6 INTs and 16 pass breakups in 2 years. Impressive numbers for him. Good use of his hands in coverage, uses them to kind of ride receivers. Again, similar to Delane in keeping a feel for where they are. Can be a little grabby if forced to chase. It did have 8 penalties in 2024. So again, is a guy who got flagged quite a bit in the SEC for the way he used his hands. Would like to see him be a bit more physical at the line of scrimmage. I think he relies too much on winning off the snap. If he can add some type of jam or just physical play at the line, I think that'll help him. Quicker wide receivers gave him some issues depending on his reaction and how he got off the snap. So again, I don't know how teams will look to use him. He can play off as well, and he's comfortable doing that. But if he can add something physical, he can be a guy who you ask to press quite a bit. I'd like to see him become more consistent as a tackler. He likes to help, just to help himself in the run game a little bit more. He returned punts at Tennessee, returned 6 as a sophomore, wasn't overly explosive, and I don't think it's something that teams will ask him to do post knee surgery, but it is something that he did. Yeah, listen, I mean, he's a really polarizing prospect because of the knee. And I was listening to some people now. This is Dallas radio, and Brian Broaddus is a former scout who talks there. And there's been talk that the knee, despite what he ran at the combine, still might not be like 100%. And there's been talk of him potentially needing another surgery. Now, who knows if that's true or not, but all NFL teams are going to have the medicals on him. What the rechecks were sometime last week, right? If you see this guy go in the top 10, which I know Finn's going to break down some teams, I do think there's a world where if the medicals come back clean and you feel comfortable taking him, he could be a top 10 pick. I don't know if I'd bet on that right now, but again, all it takes is one team that likes that film from his sophomore year to be like, we're willing to take the risk and do it. Otherwise, I think he could drop a little bit. And again, if the medical comes back and they're not clean, now I think we're talking about, is this guy a day 2 pick for teams that are willing to take a risk on him? We don't really know much yet. I can tell you the sophomore year film is impressive. It's as good as Delane's this year. It's just tough to make assumptions on a guy when you haven't seen him play football since 2024. So he'll be a very, very interesting prospect. Again, I could see him going anywhere from like 7 or 8 to somewhere early in day 2.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was actually just doing some research here. Is this a similar, do you remember Will Johnson played in Michigan, drafted by the Arizona Cardinals? Was it the same injury that he had? Was he an ACL, Will Johnson?
So Will Johnson dropped because they were concerned about degenerative knee. And it may come out that Jermod McCoy is the same thing. I mean, while you're doing your team fits, I'll look up. I think Will Johnson played his entire, I don't think Will Johnson missed time.
I thought he did get hurt, but maybe not. I'll let you look that up.
If you give me 1 second, I might be able to find.
Let's get in the team fits here for Jermod McCoy. Go ahead, you got it.
No, keep going. I'll look while you're.
I'll get into team fits for Jermod McCoy. So, right, I just went through teams like 8 through 12 here. I'm not going to get into specifics for them. So if he drops past, say, pick number 12, he drops past Dallas. Let's talk about some team fits for me. So top 30 visits for where he's been. So he has visited with Dallas, who we just talked about. He's visited with the Carolina Panthers, who have picked number 19, which is kind of interesting to me. So Carolina's current depth chart, they have J.C. Horn, who's a former first round, especially because they've been so connected to offensive linemen. So I think some of these teams like Detroit and Carolina are kind of looking at Jermod McCoy. You know what? Maybe this guy, we know he's got a knee issue. We know he's going to fall in the draft. This is a guy maybe we can swipe up in the second round. But outside of those two teams, other teams we haven't talked about, Baltimore at number 14, Minnesota at number 18. I know Minnesota had one of the best pass defenses in the league last season, right, with Brian Flores as their defensive coordinator. But I think a guy like McCoy could come on in there and, I think he'd be able to really make the Vikings defense even better. Vikings also had some losses in free agency on their in their defensive backfield. And then Baltimore, again, number 14. Baltimore's defense was really not good at all last year. So maybe they're thinking, hey, you could bring in a guy like Jermod McCoy on the outside. They still have Kyle Hamilton in the secondary. They lost Alohi Gilman. I'm not sure who their other starting outside corner right there. But, Jermod McCoy, if the knee holds up, yeah, he could be a guy who could be starting right away in that Baltimore secondary too.
Yeah, I think where he goes comes down to what teams are comfortable with his knee. On Will Johnson, he did miss games his senior year, but none of them were for the knee. He missed it for turf toe. He missed it for his shoulder injury. He had a hamstring injury that I think cropped up during his pro day, and then add all that in with the fact that I guess when the medicals came back on him, he had the degenerative knee issue, which forced him to drop. He was outstanding last year, but the questions will be long-term with him. Jermod McCoy's going to be a similar thing. I think if he gets to the second round similar to Will Johnson, someone will take a chance on him, especially early. But in the first round, if those medicals come back in a manner similar to Will Johnson's test case might be a good example. I know Will Johnson was really good last year, but these teams aren't drafting for 5 years. You're hoping to draft somebody for 10, 11, 12. And if you got a guy with knee injuries or knee issues that you think are going to be issues 5-6 years from now, we just saw with Max Crosby. I don't know how many teams are going to be willing to commit 5 years to that guy on a rookie deal and then figure out if you want to sign him or not.
All right, the next corner on our list, a guy I really like, Avieon Terrell, 5'11", 186 pounds, went to Clemson. Coming off his junior season, those might be familiar with his last name, right? He's the younger brother of the Falcons star corner A.J. Terrell. So he spent 3 seasons at Clemson. For his career at Clemson, he totaled 125 tackles, 25 pass deflections, 4 sacks, 8 forced fumbles, 3 interceptions. In 2025 alone, 48 tackles, 9 pass deflections. He was a 2-time All-ACC Player of the Year, first team in 2025. I've seen draft projections for him. Looks like he could be a mid to late first-round pick too. And recently, he's been battling a hamstring injury, which he re-aggravated during a recent workout I saw. So, looking at Avieon Terrell, strengths, weaknesses, and what's your outlook for him?
Funny, I agree with, and we'll talk about fits, but I'll just pass this along because I heard about this literally right before we came on. But like now I'm reading and listening to some interviews where people think this could be a guy that drops out of the first round altogether.
Wow.
So this tells you where people are at with corners and some of the smokescreen stuff that's coming out from teams now, because there might be teams that like Avieon Terrell that want people to believe he's going to fall and they're actually going to take him, or maybe they want to trade up. Who knows? But it's in that silly season now as we're like a week and a half out from the draft. But yeah, Avieon Terrell plays very similar to his older brother, AJ. Smooth corner and coverage, fluid in his movements, easy in his back pedal, can flip his hips when asked to do so, has a really good feel once in coverage and running with receivers. Just seems like it's easy once he gets himself in coverage. He looks like a natural corner. Breaks on a football well, keeps his eyes on the backfield, but his eyes don't really linger. 23 pass breakups in 3 seasons. That's a pretty impressive number. You'll take that. But only 3 INTs. So again, like some of these other guys, maybe not a highly productive guy, but a guy that can make plays on the football. Seems comfortable in man or zone. The way he plays translates to either. I just don't think he's an overly physical cornerback. Just wonder how that will translate to him playing outside on the NFL. Teams may view him as a slot-only guy, where I think he'd be okay, but you still need to be physical in the slot, especially in the aspect of the game I'm just going to talk about next. But in coverage, he sets himself up well to win and mirror off the snap. But sometimes he's caught playing catch up. There isn't a physical jamming type to his game off the line of scrimmage. My biggest issue with Avieon Terrell is he just doesn't look interested in tackling. I'm just going to be honest. When I watch him on film, he looks like
Not a lot of corners are.
He wants nothing to do with it, which if we're talking about him being a slot corner, that's a concern. Like, your slot corner has to be involved in getting downhill and making plays on the football. He just doesn't show interest in doing that. He isn't a great tackler in general. He doesn't always look like he wants to be involved in the run game. And and he can just struggle to get off blocks. He was used as a blitzer, which, funny enough, he was pretty effective in at Clemson. He had 3 sacks last year coming off the edge, so that was good. Again, don't know if he'll be a big takeaway guy, but he can still make plays on the ball. He didn't run at the combine, and his pro day stuff was just shocking. Now, he apparently injured his hamstring on the first 40 and then tried to run it again. I don't know how true that is, but he ran 2.46 times, like 4.66, 4.68 in that range. It had to have been because of the injury, because he does not look that slow on film, but he did re-injure the hamstring. I think his projections are mid-first to somewhere in the early second to mid to second. Again, it's going to feel with him, or it's going to come down to if you feel he can be an outside corner or if he's strictly a slot guy. In coverage, he looks comfortable. I just don't know if he can be overly physical. And then my NFL comparisons are his brother, AJ Terrell. He plays very similar to his brother, and DJ Turner.
Yeah, this guy's going to play as well as his brother. Some team's going to get a hell of a player. I give him a lot of credit, man, trying to gut it out through that hamstring injury. If he, he still ran it if he wasn't feeling. Yeah, I mean, if a corner running 4.68, I mean, that guy might not even get drafted.
If you watch him on film, like you're watching this guy, like there's no way in hell. I'm not saying to anybody listening, I'm not saying he's a 4.4 guy, but he ain't a 4.6 guy. He's somewhere in between, and you'll be content with that with how he covers.
So let's talk about some team fits for him. Again, I'm not going to get into the early picks. We just talked about team needs for some of these teams. I have Pittsburgh here at 21. So the Steelers, right, they were a bottom 5 in passing yards allowed per game last season. Their secondary was not good at all. They've done a lot to improve it so far in the offseason. They signed Jamel Dean, who was, I think for you and me, was our number 1 free agent corner available. They added some guys in the secondary. They to the safety position specifically. They signed Jaquan Brisker. They signed Darnell Savage, but and they do have Joey Porter Jr. there, who's still good. He's a very good corner, but they could use another guy in there to upgrade that position. So Avieon Terrell could be that guy for Pittsburgh, maybe at 21. So this is a sneaky team here. Buffalo Bills, number 22, right? So they had the number 1 pass defense in the league last season, but if you look at their current cornerback depth chart, there's not really much there. Maxwell Harrison's still there. Christian Benford's there. He's a good player. Tre'Davious White had like a really good year for them last year. He's a little bit on the older side, but he's currently actually a free agent. Buffalo is, not brought him back, at least as of now. Maybe he's a guy who, maybe he'll be a guy that goes into, doesn't sign till like July or something right before training camp starts. But Buffalo, yeah, right. I mean, that's what kind of these veteran guys do, but Buffalo doesn't really have a replacement right now on their roster. So maybe Buffalo would look at Avieon Terrell as maybe at pick number 22. And then as we get later into the first round, I have Kansas City here again at number 29. Of course, if they choose Mansoor Delane at number 9, I don't see them going corner, but if they don't choose a corner at 9, and actually, if you go to my mock draft that I posted on our YouTube channel, I showed you what I did at number 9 as the Kansas City Chiefs. So go check out that video. But if Kansas City doesn't choose a corner at 9, number 29 makes absolute sense, right? With no McDuffie anymore, no Jalen Watson anymore. Miami again at 30. I said it earlier. They have absolutely no corners at all on the roster who were playable, in my opinion. And then Seattle at 32. Reek Woolen left them. He went to the Eagles in free agency. So there is an opening in the Seattle secondary right there. Of course, they have Devin Witherspoon. They have Josh Jobe, but they could use a third corner to run with those two guys.
If you're not scared about this guy playing the slot, I think any team, maybe from pick 15 on, that could use a slot corner will seriously consider this guy, because in coverage he is good. Like there's not much that you're scared of in coverage. The question is, can he be physical enough at the NFL level to do what is needed to play in the slot? I think your team fits are all teams that make sense. And again, I think you're getting a guy that at worst will be a pretty good slot corner in the NFL, and at best, he's a guy you can throw on the outside, similar to his brother, and can be productive NFL cover corner guy. I'm very curious. When I heard that stuff about him potentially falling out of the first round today, I was kind of taken aback by that. But with this year's draft, who knows?
All right, let's get to our next corner. So Colton Hood, 6 feet, 193 pounds, another corner from Tennessee, coming off his sophomore season, actually. So he's played for 3 different teams in 3 seasons. He was originally recruited to Auburn.
Athletics.
Yeah, right. Gotta love that transfer portal. Originally recruited to Auburn, where he played, or he didn't really play that much in 2023. 2024, he transfers to Colorado. 24 tackles, 6 pass deflections, 2 interceptions. 2025, transferred to Tennessee, recorded 50 tackles, 8 pass deflections, 1 forced fumble, and an interception. He was a finalist for the Jim Thorpe Award this past year. He returned a pick 6 and a fumble return for touchdowns this year, and he earned third team All SEC honors. He ran a 4.44 40. And actually, he's got some bloodlines here. His uncle Roderick Hood was a NFL player too for 8 seasons in the league. You might remember that name. So Colton Hood, he's projected as a late first round into the middle of the second round pick. So looking at Hood, his strengths, his weaknesses, and what's your outlook for him?
Yeah, Colton Hood, physical cornerback, kind of the opposite of Avieon Terrell. He wants to play at the line of scrimmage, press, and be physical off the snap, can be overly handsy, after the snap. Only had 6 penalties in college, but I think it could be a problem in the NFL, and 4 of those penalties came last year. He moves well, good in his back pedal, can flip his hips when needed to change directions. Isn't as fluid as other draft prospects, but still can mirror and run with receivers. Doesn't have the quickest first step, but makes up for it with his straight line speed, recovery speed. Ran a 4.44 40 at the combine, so he does have good speed for a cornerback. Doesn't have elite speed when asking to break and make plays on the ball. And this is why I think he's more comfortable playing up versus playing off. Can turn his head, turns his head to help try to make plays on the football. Would like to see him attack the ball a little bit more once it gets to the receiver's hands or when it's in the air. Just feels like there are times the wide receivers can bully him a little bit, especially for a guy who's as physical as he is. He's in the position. Now just go make a play on the football. But even with those concerns, he had 14 pass breakups in 3 seasons, really 2 seasons. Now, with that said, 8 of them this year came against Syracuse and Eastern Tennessee State, 5 against Syracuse and 3 against Eastern Tennessee State. The other 3 were against SEC caliber teams. So numbers look a bit inflated, but has the profile and the physical side to improve that aspect of his game. I don't think or on film, I didn't think he looked as effective playing off coverage, whether in man or zone. He just didn't have that quickness to put his foot on the ground and go make a play on the ball or the tackler when he's playing 7 to 10 yards off the line of scrimmage. Tennessee asked him to do it a lot, especially with the way he played. In zone, they play a lot of cover 3, and he was kind of that third guy that would drop off and cover that back third. He's a guy that I'd want to play up at the line of scrimmage and let him be physical with guys. He's really good mirroring them off the line of scrimmage. He moves well. When he gets tight off the snap, he's really difficult to beat. And I don't think Tennessee asked him to do it consistently enough. His eyes can linger on the backfield at times. He wants to get involved in the run game and will actively look to find the football. I think he wants to be a tackler and find the football. He's a good tackler, but I'd like to see him improve on his angles when he's going to make. Think he can be a really effective press guy in the NFL. Again, I think he could be anywhere from a mid-first to day 2, early to mid-second round guy. Like, he's one that I kind of think Seattle might just snag if he's there at 32 and be like, just learn how to play with this defense and some of these guys, and he'd fit in great there. NFL comps are called Carlton Davis, Tyson Campbell. I think the low end, like if he doesn't project the way I think he could, Tyson Campbell is still a serviceable starter. I think the high upside, some of the stuff I've read is like a Marshawn Lattimore type. When Lattimore was really good, I think that's what Colton Hood can project to. Kind of feel like he's fallen off a little bit in the last couple of weeks. And when I revisited him this weekend just a little bit, I was reminded that he is a good corner. Like, he's a guy who Dallas has been talked about with that 20. So again, just with these corners and what you want and what you don't want, it can fluctuate where they go, but there's a wide range. And if you get Colton Hood, I think you're getting a guy who can play on the outside in day 1 and start for your football team. You're muted. Finn, you're muted?
Of course I'm muted. Why wouldn't I be muted?
It was you this time, not me.
So I was going to ask you here, I got to throw one more question at you. The ultimate scenario here, Dallas is on the board. Let's say Mansoor Delane is not there and you got to choose a corner. Out of these 3, Hood, Terrell, and McCoy, who are you drafting?
I'm not taking any of them.
Really?
Wow. The guy I'm taking, I'll talk to you about next.
Oh, okay. All right. So let's get into team fits here for Colton Hood. So again, you mentioned Seattle at pick number 32. Yeah, I echo that. They actually had him in for a top 30 visit, right? This is a team that lost Reek Woolen in free agency. So their current cornerbacks, like I said, they have Devin Witherspoon, who's still there. Josh Jobe is still there. They also signed Noah Igbenogany, right? He's a former Miami Dolphin.
Dallas Cowboy.
Was he a Cowboy? I didn't realize he was a Cowboy.
They traded Kelvin Joseph for him. That trade worked out for no one.
I remember Miami drafted him. I didn't realize he was with Dallas. Well, I guess that's why your secondary was so bad last year.
Thanks.
And then again, Colton Hood, if he falls out of the first round, I have the Jets here at 33. There's been rumored interest there. Plus the Jets are apparently looking to add to their corner room. As a Jet fan, I'm not drafting a corner with pick number 33. We have Brandon Stevens, A. Thomas, who was a third-round pick last year, and they signed Nahshon Wright from the Bears, who had a pretty big year turning the ball over for them. So I'm not drafting a corner at number 33, but again, as we get into the second round, I think Colton Hood's probably a guy who would go, I guess, probably by the mid-second round. There's a lot of teams, like I said, with earlier picks in the first round that need corners, so I think Hood will be a pick taken in the second round, maybe by one of those teams, maybe in the late 30s to early 40s.
So to not cop out on your question, if it's between those three, and I knew the medicals were good on Jermod McCoy, I would take Jermod McCoy. But not knowing the medicals, I would take Hood, and then I would take Terrell. Just because when we're talking about Dallas, I think they really want a guy who can play in the slot. They paid DaRon Bland. I personally would be fine moving DaRon Bland to the slot. I don't think Dallas wants to do that. They paid him to be an outside corner. I think they wanted to be an outside corner. They drafted Siobhan Revel a year ago in the third round. They raved about him for an entire preseason, and halfway through the season until he came and he played. I have to imagine they want him to play. They have Kobe Durant, right? I'm not losing my mind.
From the Rams, yeah.
That they signed him. I'm pretty sure they want him to play in some capacity. So I would take Colton Hood, as I think he, looking to do what I want my corner to do in the slot, can do it better right now. Even if I think Terrell is probably a better cover corner on my board, I think I do have Terrell ahead of Hood. Truth be told, depending on what the board looked like, I'd be okay with Dallas taking any of these three corners, because I think any three of these guys, Colton Hood included, are going to be day one starters that can contribute to your football team.
All right, so we went through the top four corners here. Let's talk about the best of the rest. Are there any other cornerbacks that we did not cover here that our audience should be familiar with?
Yeah, and I have them up on the other monitor here, just so if I'm looking over here, that's what I'm doing. Chris Johnson from San Diego State, 6 foot, 193. He's a senior. He's a guy that I did not know much about, even watching these guys and studying this stuff, until about a week, 2 weeks ago. Actually, when we started talking about doing this series, I kind of started making lists. This is a kid that there are multiple people that have him as like their third corner on their draft board. Watching this kid, he's a really, really good corner. He's really smooth in coverage. Mirrors receivers very well. When he can plant his foot and drive on a football, he does so with speed. It helps him as a tackler, and it helps him find the football. I was really, really impressed with this kid in coverage. I thought he struggled with like jump ball, contested catch stuff. I don't know how great he'll be with that. He can be an effective blitzer, and there is a little clunkiness to him when he's in his back pedal and he's asked to then plant and break. But I haven't finished them. I watched the Washington State game, I watched the Cal game, and then I was in the middle of watching a third game today. But from what I've seen right now, this guy is right in that group with Hood, Terrell, McCoy. McCoy is better if healthy, but I think he's right with those three guys. And if Chris Johnson gets drafted in the first round, do not be shocked. Dallas had him in for a 30 visit. I think this is a kid who, if you're more comfortable with him, or you're looking for an outside guy and maybe you're a little bit more comfortable with him and the way he plays versus Colton Hood, or, with the medicals on the other two, I could see Chris Johnson going somewhere in the first round. I'm hoping to finish him completely and do a write-up on him sometime this week to see where exactly I would stack him. I think it's unfair to the other guys I've watched that only after watching 3 games, I think he's the third best corner in this draft, but I think he's right there with those guys. And then the other guy is D'Angelo Pons from Indiana. Hold on, I'm trying to get his size here. Here's the issue with D'Angelo Pons. He's 5'8", 182 pounds. If this kid was 6 foot, he'd be a first-round draft pick. You saw what he did for Indiana, especially in that Oregon game. He makes plays on the football, really, really smooth, physical for his size. The problem is he's 5'8", and to ask him to be a outside corner at 5'8" is difficult. So if we're talking about D'Angelo Pons potentially being a slot guy in the NFL, you're going to be hard pressed to take a slot guy, at least within the first 20 picks of this NFL draft. Could D'Angelo Pons sneak into the back end of the first round? Yeah, I think. I mean, if I didn't look up the Cowboys' 30 visits for corners, I would not be shocked if every corner we talked about today visited Dallas, because I'm sure they're doing their due diligence and getting a feel for where these corners fit. But I think the top 6 corners in this draft are the 6 I just mentioned, and I think any of them, take Mansoor, Delane out, the other 5 can go anywhere from mid-first round to somewhere in mid-second round. I think if you get any of these guys, you're really, really happy with them. And the last guy I'm just going to make mention of very quickly, who I have not watched yet, is, hold on, I just had him up, the corner from South Carolina, Brandon Cisse. At the beginning of this process, some people had him in and around the back end of the first round. He's kind of fallen back since then. Again, I think a little bit smaller, question marks as to where he fits best, but a really good athlete. So if you're getting Brandon Cisse in the mid to back end of the second round, this is a guy who he might struggle. He's a man-to-man guy more versus a zone guy. So if you play man, he can come in and be an outside guy. You might have to live with the warts in him a little bit, but in time he could develop into be a good complementary cornerback for whoever you have next to him.
All right, folks. Thanks for hanging in the loft with us. The official Loft Sports podcast can be found wherever you consume your podcasts. Check out our website, loftsportsusa.com. We continue to add scouting reports for the draft. Please rate and review our articles. Please let us know how we're doing. Feedback's very important for us. Our NFL Draft Series will conclude on Friday when we break down the top safeties in the draft. We also have some bonus episodes coming your way, right? We got the NBA playoffs are coming up. The season just ended yesterday. Those playing games are going to be starting, Tuesday and Wednesday, I think, this week. And then, the finals of those games will be Friday. So we're going to get the NBA playoffs. We'll do a preview for that. The NHL playoffs, the NHL season's winding down. We'll do a little preview for that. WrestleMania is coming up this upcoming weekend. We got a little preview we're going to be, doing for WrestleMania too. Tom will be on that, and we got another one of my buddies joining the show to break down the match card for those 2 nights. So follow Loft Sports on X, YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. Follow us on all 5 social platforms. We are under @LoftSportsUSA. Please rate and review us on whichever platform you listen to your podcasts. Thanks, everyone, for listening. We'll talk to you soon.